From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Ted Nesi will join me on the second half. 1 year after a scathing report launched a state takeover of the Providence Public Schools, the Rhode Island Department of Education released its blueprint for turning around the troubled system. Joining me live from the State House to talk about what's called the Turnaround Action Plan is Education Commissioner Angélica Infante-Green. Commissioner, it's good to speak with you and thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
But you set lofty goals in this turnaround plan that came out this week, but my colleague Steph Machado wrote on WPRI.com the plan is, quote, short on details for some of the actual plans. And Dan McGowan from the Boston Globe, he put it more bluntly. He said your plan, quote, promises to prepare a steak without a stove or a grill. Is it truly an action plan or just a statement of priorities?
So it is an action plan, and you know, his comment about stove and grill, I would say we have a stove and it's in the kitchen, right? It's not out in the open. But what we are setting is these really, they're aggressive goals. Well, part of the problem that's happened in Providence is that there's been no accountability. If you didn't meet certain markers, people were like, oh, well, you know, and kept moving on. We've set markers, and our job, the job of the superintendent of the district and of RIDE is to make sure that we are what are the things that we're going to do to meet those markers. Some of the things we already started doing. So here's the goal. These are the 5 things we're doing, and we're going to be giving feedback quarterly as well as information. And this is what the community designed, what the community has said is important. We need to get there. Part of the problem with a lot of these plans that end up being on somebody's shelf is that there isn't room for flexibility. And our commitment is to work with the community and turn around the district. So, you know, I know that Dan wanted to see these kind of fireworks. That's not how this work is done. This work is very deep. It takes a lot of hard work, and it takes retooling at times.
Well, Commissioner, if I can just interrupt you for a second, I don't think it's just a reporter that wanted to see some plans. I think there are probably a lot of parents out there that were wondering why it wasn't a little more specific and fleshed out. What do you say to them?
Well, I've been meeting with parents, so I think the parents that have participated, the parents in Providence that I've been meeting with, have been very happy. We had our first meeting Tuesday, I think it was, or Wednesday, and we had 188 parents, and we didn't hear that. What we heard was a lot of gratitude and a lot of work that went into it, and what are the steps that we're going to take together, because we're co-creating this. So I think that we need to be very clear on that. And I'm not trying to put Dan on the spot or anyone else, but that's not how you do this work. That is not where you make the changes. You have to be flexible and you have to put in the work. Part of the challenge is with these plans is that they're on a shelf and nobody wants to deviate from them, and they don't get put in place and they're not actionable. That's what we're going to do. That's the work. The parts that are in there, if you look at all the recommendations, they're in there. What it doesn't spell out is X school is going to be here, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, which school, those specifics are not going to be there because those things will change.
Are you considering expanding high-performance charter schools as part of the plan? Is that on the table?
Well, I think that I'm looking at the district as a whole. So am I planning that? You know, I don't say that we're having that conversation per se, but what we are having is the conversation of how do we work together as a district. We have all sorts of different providers, and we have to work together to learn from one another. So that I can guarantee you. Since I have been here, my goal has been to work collaboratively with traditional public schools and charter schools, because they are all public schools. So we have been meeting. And I don't just meet in Providence, throughout the state to have those conversations.
Look, you said you don't want to negotiate the union contract through the turnaround plan, but I have to imagine that the collective bargaining agreement must be front and center for you on this as you try to put together a plan to turn around the schools.
Absolutely. You know, it says it in the plan, right? I don't want to do this right now, but yeah, if we don't change that collective bargaining agreement, the plan means nothing. At the end of the day, the plan means nothing. This has been a problem here for at least 40 years. And what we have done, and the collective bargaining agreement has done this as well, is prioritize adults. And there's one Band-Aid to fix another problem, another Band-Aid. There are layers and layers that we need to take all that apart. So yes, without a different collective bargaining agreement, we're not going to see change.
Do you need to change the CBA in order to extend the school day, and is that something you want to do?
Absolutely. Do I want to extend the school day? Yeah. I want the schools to have the options to do that. If the kids need that extra support, attention, instruction, I should be able to do that. That's something that I feel very strongly about.
Do you have to change a union contract to do it?
Absolutely. Yes, we do.
So if you fail to reach a deal with the teachers union that embraces these changes that you want, do you think that you have the authority and the power to tear up the contract and start over again?
I think the Crowley Act gives me great authority, and I am hopeful that we won't have to do that and we won't have to have that conversation, but I am committed to making the change. I think the union is committed to making the change. So I think we're not ready for that type of conversation at this point.
I should point out, you and I are talking on a Friday morning. Last night, the city budget was presented to the city council, and the proposal calls for level funding of the Providence schools instead of the usual increase to the funding formula. So that translates into what will be a loss of about $6 million in cuts. Some of those cuts you've already you've been planning for, and you've started to make those already. But how do you see paying for all these ambitious goals in the turnaround plan when the budget outlook is just so bleak because of the pandemic?
So we will adjust, because what we've put in there, it requires us, the people that are currently in the system, to readjust, right? And that's why this is so important, because we're in a time right now that we don't know what's going to happen a month from now. We don't know what the budgets are going to look like. There may be even more cuts. I don't know. So we have to be flexible, and changing instruction in the classroom is not going to cost us more money. Changing high expectations is not going to cost us more money. Those are things that need to happen, that we need to address how we work with the students in the district and how adults work with one another. That's not going to cost us more money. We need to change our frame of mind and our expectations and how we do business, period.
I want to broaden our focus from Providence to statewide now, and there are states across the country that have announced they're going to do 2 in-person school days a week. For parents here in Rhode Island, right now, is the plan, can you say the plan is to have kids in school 5 days a week?
So we don't know what that's going to look like. The districts have been asked to put together 3 plans, all in person, or mostly in person. And what does that look like? They have to put a plan together, but health and safety comes first. Does that mean renting another building so that there's more space? Whatever it is, they have to come up with that plan. Then it's partially in person, then it's limited in person. So we have these parameters. The goal is to plan for whatever scenario may come our way August 31st. We are learning about this virus. Every day we learn something new. So what we are getting ready to do is be prepared for any scenario so that we don't get caught off guard. We had to shift in March. We had a week to put it together. Now we have a couple of months where we're looking at this very deeply and figuring out how much money are we going to need, how many buses are we going to need, what do we need to shift, can we do PD across districts, what are we going to do to be able to collaborate and be ready for August 31st.
So, and I should point out, Steph Machado wrote about this guidance from the state, and we have that plan on WPRI.com so parents can take a look at that. If it's, as you say, district by district, and they have to come up with these 3 plans, fully open, partially, or totally remote learning, when will parents know? Is there a deadline in which these districts have to report to you so the rest of the public will know what they can expect come the end of August?
So they have to submit their plans, and we will give them feedback. They're going to be working with a person from our office, and we have an organization that's also helping us, and we will have the plans. The plans will be public. They will be on the district website as well as our website. And I think your question is, when will the parents know which plan will be put into place? It's going to be based on the data, right? What's happening with the virus? Our numbers have been decreasing, but if there's an uptick, we may go to plan A. If it's steady, then we're going to go to plan B. We're going to have to be very nimble. That's why we're going to have to be ready for whatever comes our way. So if it's the most aggressive plan, we have that in place. So I think that we're just going to have to be patient with that.
2 of the 3 plans will require transportation, and that is becoming a huge problem. The school reopening plan has guidelines for school buses, and just first, I was curious about one of them.
Yep.
I read that students are to be screened when getting on the bus. What does screened mean? Are they going to get their temperature checked every time they walk on the school bus?
It depends. So right now, the Department of Health has this app where you can attest to that before they get on the bus. There may be temperature checks. Everybody has to put what the protocol is in their plan. And the more protocols in place, obviously, the more we're mitigating any of the risks. So that's what we've been asking them, and we will have that ready. So there's some places that have had very few cases, other places where have been greatly impacted. So the plans are going to look a little different.
The big one is students must sit 1 per seat unless they are from the same household. And we're hearing, and I'm sure you're hearing, from school district leaders that say there aren't enough buses to accommodate that, money aside. Are you going to ask 50%, say, of parents to provide their own transportation for their kids? Is that part of it?
Well, I think we're going to have to think out of the box, because you're correct. The busing is one of the biggest challenges we have, right? How do we want to transport kids safely, so we are following the CDC guidelines. We could also transport kids if they're going to be in a pod, and we can have them all stay together during the day. So there are many ways to do it, but if parents can take their kids to school, we're going to think out of the box. There are going to be different ways that we're going to do this. And that's what we're in the process of doing right now, because it's going to be difficult. It's a difficult process for us.
But school districts have to plan if parents can take their kids to school. They have to do the math. They have to know how many kids are going to be driven and how many.
Correct.
Correct.
That's what they're doing right now.
They're doing a survey right now of parents willing to take their kids to school?
Yeah. Well, yes, they're going to start having those conversations. For the districts that may not have all the buses, some districts will be okay. They have their own buses. Other districts that will need to have that conversation. We'll need to canvass. We'll need to make plans. So there's all these. That's why we have this time frame, is to plan, reiterate, learn from one another. There is no playbook on this. We are ahead of the curve, I would say, because we are planning. As you see, other states have made decisions and had to walk some of those back. We are still in the planning phase, and we are making sure that the most important thing is information, that we keep teachers, students, families safe. So we are going to put measures in place that will maintain the families and the students safe. That is our primary goal. And that's where our point of departure in all this work.
You talk about the pods, and so this is a group of kids that pretty much stay together from beginning to end. And in elementary schools, that seems a little bit easier to deliver. All the kids are in the same class. Mm-hmm. Is the challenge for that mentality really the middle school and high school? I know there's talk about swapping, instead of students going from class to class, the teachers would go in and out. But in middle schools and high schools, you have different levels, AP math versus regular math, and those students,
yep.
So any thought on how that's going to be managed?
Well, I think every school operates differently, but I'll give you an example. So high school, so teachers can go in maybe, but remember, we're thinking this is not forever. So if you look across at the scheduling and say, okay, all these kids are going to need these particular classes to graduate. So maybe we offer those first semester. How can we group them? I think we're just going to have to be creative. Remember, this is not regular school. We're not going back to what we left. So we have to be really creative. And at the helm of that is safety. And if kids are going to move, are we going to have different bell schedules? Are we going to have 5, 6, 7 different bell schedules? What does it look like? How are kids going to walk down the hallway? Cleaning of the desks. All those things are things that we're going to have to look at. Also, kids facing forward. We've been for quite a few years now really looking at tables instead of desks. So we're changing how we do business. And that requires a lot of thinking, rejiggering, and maneuvering things a little different than we have in the past.
Commissioner, I have one final question for you, and I don't envy you. We started this conversation talking about trying to turn around the Providence Public Schools, and you're doing all that, and a pandemic hits, and now trying to manage what that's going to look like in the fall. What keeps you up at night? What's the number one thing that worries you the most?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. I think making sure that we do right by kids and families, safety-wise, but also instructionally, right? We want to be in a place that we can try to stay ahead of this virus. We've done a pretty good job. We have moved very quickly, and that's what we intend to do. And what keeps me up at night is that it changes every day. I don't know what I'm going to wake up to, right? What new information is going to be out there. But what our commitment is to make it public, to work with the community, to work with the districts, to work with the charter schools, to work with even parochial and private schools, because that's also something that we have done. Even though they're not under my purview, we meet with them, and we've assigned a person from RIDE, because we're looking at this as a statewide initiative. So it's very different. We're approaching this very different than other states.
State Education Commissioner Angélica Infante-Green, thank you so much for joining us, and best of luck. When we come back, Eyewitness News politics and business editor Ted Nesi joins me live from the State House to break down this week in news. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Joining me live from the State House, as he does every week, is Ted Nesi. And Ted, you are our politics editor, so I want to start with politics. The General Assembly races are now starting to come into focus a little bit more. I believe the signature deadline is July 10th, so people are, lining up to run. What do the matchups, or I guess lack of matchups, look like right now?
Well, Tim, we have about 1 in 3 state lawmakers in Rhode Island are running unopposed as of right now. There's still a little fluidity to the numbers. Maybe someone doesn't turn in their signatures or something, but I'd say this is a pretty solid picture of where it's going to be. So that's 39 of the 113 state lawmakers, reps and senators, are basically already in, barring something very shocking. So this is one reason you don't see a ton of change year to year at the General Assembly. A lot of the lawmakers, their districts, they don't even get an opponent. Quite a few of these people haven't had opponents in a number of years, so there's that. But when you look more closely, I think there's quite a few interesting races. Obviously, a lot of people are going to pay close attention once again in Cranston's District 15 for the House, which is Speaker Mattiello's district. This year you have Barbara Ann Fenton Fung running as a Republican against him. She, of course, is the First Lady of Cranston, married to Mayor Alan Fung, who's leaving office this year. You have quite a few progressive challengers entering Democratic primaries on both sides. A lot of them are organizing through that new group, the Rhode Island Political Cooperative, which some activists, including former gubernatorial candidate Matt Brown, put together. You have a number of places where we're seeing comeback efforts. Just off the top of my head, some people, former Rep. Doreen Costa is running for a Senate seat. Former Rep. Spencer Dickinson's running in South County. Former Rep. Tony Giarrusso is trying to get his seat back that he had in EG. And there's a number of those. I'd say there's maybe 8, 9, 10 people who've served in the legislature before making a comeback bid this year. But a lot of them are taking on people they lost to previously, so you don't know how their chances will be. So it should be an interesting couple of months, and we'll see, again, how you do a General Assembly race, which is very door-to-door. Obviously, they're not running television commercials for General Assembly in a time of a pandemic.
I wonder, when you said that about 1/3 of the General Assembly is running unopposed right now, how does that match up to previous years? Is that about right? Is that greater? Is that smaller? Kind of on track to normal?
Yeah, I meant to look that up actually, and I confess I haven't had a chance to
I
yet.
put you on the spot on live TV. I love it.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, even I get the tough questions when you're on with Tim White. But I'd say, Tim, roughly speaking, it's in line with what we've seen in previous years. I'd say somewhere around a third. I want to say some years it gets closer to even 40%. And again, we do want to see what the final number is. For example, Stephen Ucci up in Johnston, Rep. Ucci, who served since '04, he put in papers to run. He would be an incumbent. And then when I called him the day after, because another Democrat had filed against him, he said, yeah, actually I decided not to run and I'm supporting that guy, which is the old, handoff where they tell a friend and that person is the only one who knows to put in their papers to run for a seat that's going to open up. So we want to see a couple, about 2-ish more weeks. We'll see how this all shakes out.
I wonder if this, as you point out, rightfully, the pandemic is going to have a dramatic change on how people campaign, particularly with these. You got to knock door to door in these General Assembly races. I wonder if that favors, what do you think? Does that favor the incumbent or even those list of names that you rattled off that were state lawmakers and now are trying to be one once again? That name recognition might actually help them because there can't be a lot of grassroots campaigning right now.
I would think so, Tim. I mean, obviously there's a lot of new ways to campaign. There's a lot of people who are, there are a lot of younger challengers who are very good with digital tools. But for a rep or a Senate race, I think having name recognition, incumbency, not to mention, frankly, the financial advantage, that usually means you have more campaign finance money available. So you can maybe you have to do more mailers, direct mail to people's houses or other kinds of voter contact that cost more money than just walking around your district. So I do think it's going to be a good year for that. The other question is, what will happen looking ahead to November for the Republicans? They have quite a few challengers, and as I said, some of them known folks like Dorian Costa, Tony Giarrusso, trying to make a comeback. On the other hand, presidential years are usually harder for Republicans in Rhode Island because a lot of more people come out to vote the Democratic ticket because they want to vote for president than in midterm years when just Congress is on the ballot. So, they'll be facing that headwind like they did in 2016, 2012, 2008.
I'm glad I'm not a politics editor this year, Ted. As you point out, this is going to be a tough one to cover, I think. All right, let's switch to Governor Gina Raimondo. You and I watched the briefing she gave on Wednesday together, and I think it stood out to us, and I'm sure to everyone else, that she struck a very different tone out of the box when she started that briefing, threatening to have to clamp down again if people don't start following the rules of social distancing. What was your thought as you heard her talk on Wednesday afternoon?
Yeah, I think that was a very real, she acknowledged she went in there wanting to get that message and tone across to people, but I think it was pretty genuine. I mean, just before we went on the air, actually, as you were talking to the commissioner, Tim, I was checking, on my computer for this morning's COVID updates. Florida this morning on Friday just smashed its daily record for new cases. Just before we came on the air, the Texas governor reversed course on reopening, closing the bars, capacity limits at restaurants. So I think it was scary how fast the states in the Northeast were going up the curve of COVID cases before they locked down in March. And I think the governor, doesn't want to go through that again, but especially seeing these they're kind of science experiments down in these states like Florida and Texas that opened more quickly and are now seeing the effects of that. So I think she really doesn't want to have to turn that around, both, politically it's not great, economically it would be so harmful, and socially I think it would be very hard for Rhode Islanders as well as people in Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey to have to go back to a lockdown to reverse course when they feel they're making progress. So I think she just worries that as the case numbers stay low in Rhode Island, which they are, people will get complacent, and these spikes clearly can happen pretty fast. It wasn't so long ago we thought there was decent stability still in Florida and Texas.
The indication that I'm getting is, as we talk on a Friday morning, we're not going to hear the governor announce today about any restrictions of travel from some of these hotspot states that you just rattled off. I think we'll probably hear a little bit more early next week about if there will be restrictions put in place. But she appeared on CNBC earlier this week, and we sort of got a sense as to what some of the things that she's considering in terms of restrictions for people coming from those states.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we now have the tri-state area, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, doing a 14-day quarantine once again for people from these hotspot states. The governor is looking at that. We also know she's looking at potentially mandatory COVID tests for people who arrive from states like that. But, there's been a lot of studies done since COVID got to the United States, and or even if you look at how it got to Europe, it's travel. Right? And we know that while travel is still way down, people are starting to travel. We certainly know the Florida to Rhode Island travel this time of year is usually pretty significant. Grandparents coming back to see their kids, to enjoy the summer weather up here. And so, it's a real risk they have to think about if the cases are really starting to grow down there, it being brought back into Rhode Island in a way that goes unchecked for a little bit.
Less than a minute here, Ted. You reported that a nursing home on the east side announced it was closing and they cited COVID-19. You have to wonder if this is the first shoe to drop in Rhode Island in that industry.
Yeah, I mean, the warnings, you and I have both done stories on this, Tim. The warnings from the nursing home industry are dire about the financial strain they're in, the strain on their staffs. I mean, to see this many residents die so quickly in some of these places, the cost of the PPA and all that. And Rhode Island is very reliant, more than most states, on nursing homes. So I think this is going to be one of the, I can't say post-pandemic stories because we're still in it, but one of the secondary effects we really have to watch the next few months.
All right, Ted Nesi joining me live from the State House. Thanks so much for joining us. If you missed the show, it's on WPRI.com. I'm Tim White. We'll see you next week.